Welcome to episode 4 of these Ghost tutorials. Today we're going to continue with modulators, so be sure that you watch last episode. The frequency modulators are going to be left for the last because they are the most unique ones. So let's go actually to the random modulators. A random modulator, as you can guess, is going to create a random value over time. Again, Ghost have an excellent visualizer, so by default you can see that we have this curved kind of movement. So the first parameter is the retrigger. For a random, it means that every time you press a new key, you will have a new random value. The best way to visualize it is to start pressing a note repeatedly. If we turn it off, now we will have a random movement, but as you can see with this technique, it's following a steady line, which is random, but not resetting the randomness each time you press a key. The SANH stands for sample and hold, which is a randomization technique, and this is going to make the movement stepped. That means that now we don't have a curved movement, we actually are holding a value depending on the rate. By the way, here the rate is on hertz, but you can also set it to be on beats. Not only that, as with the LFO, you can also set it to be key tracking, which means audio rate. Now, random on audio rate is basically noise. The other parameter is the random, which is the probability of triggering a new random value. Finally, we have the amount of steps. Now, you see that the minimum is 2. And when you set it like that, the random is going to go from the lowest value to the maximum value. No in between. If you set it to 3, now it's going to go from the bottom to the top and or to the middle. If you set it on 4, now the middle is divided on 2 sections. That means that it's going to divide the amount of possible values depending on the number you have here. The usefulness for this is, for instance, when you set it to 2, you can use this random as a toggle. For instance, you can set it to modulate the amount of frequency modulation of an oscillator over the other, and that way you have a value without FM, another with FM. Other typical thing to do with randoms is to set it to beats and apply it to any parameter you want, and that way you have a rhythmic result, but that's not predictable. Next up we have keyboard controls. Key is for key tracking, vel is for velocity, and AT is for aftertouch. All of them have the same interface. I will explain why right now. A key modulator means that the lower notes will trigger lower values, or the higher notes will trigger higher values. This is great to apply to a filter because sometimes in a low-pass filter, higher notes are going to be cut off completely. Now, this is the normal behavior of a key tracking, but this XY grid lets you actually to change that behavior. The vertical line is amount of modulation, and in this case, the horizontal line is lower to higher keys. So for instance, if you invert the line, now the lower keys will trigger the most amount of modulation. Other nice trick that takes a bit of time to program, but the result can be very nice, is to actually set it to be like a square wave and start modulating different parameters by different amounts, creating 2 completely different sounds. And that way you got like a split keyboard. The velocity is how hard you press a key. Originally, velocity in synthesizers aims to give expressiveness to a synthetic sound. I mean, on a piano, when you play softly, you can hear it sounds softer. When you go harder, you can feel it goes harder with more harmonics and so on. The most typical thing to do with velocity is to actually use it to modulate the volume of the synthesizer and also the cutoff point of a filter. But you can also use it for more experimental stuff. For instance, I like to use it to modulate the fine-tuning of an oscillator. That way, the harder I press, the more detuned the sound is going to be, the more stable. And I think that I haven't mentioned is that you can actually modulate the parameters inside another modulator. So for instance, you can use velocity to change the decay of an envelope, giving you small plugs to bigger plugs. And again, we have this XY grid letting us change this relationship. If you invert it, the softer you play, the harder it's going to sound. Or you can create crazy shapes, and maybe sometimes it's useful to calibrate the velocity to your liking. Finally, we have Aftertouch. This is a feature for some MIDI controllers and synthesizers. When you keep pressing a key, you can actually press again, so you can lower the key, and that will create a value. Let me demonstrate. Look at my finger and also look at the dot on the Aftertouch line. Lastly, we have the frequency modulators. These are a special kind of modulator because they can only be used to modulate frequency values. These are present only on the oscillators and on the filters. As with the others, on the horizontal line we have the time, but now on the vertical line we have set frequency values from 20 Hz to 20 kHz. That means that you can't set the amount of modulation because it's going to change the frequency always on those values. The thing that this type of modulator is used the most on is to create percussive sounds. Because to get punchy kind of sounds, you will need a fast envelope to control the decay of a pitch modulation. I mean, let me show it to you very slow, and then we start increasing the rate. The retriggering and the loop are the same for the LFO, as well with the rate options. The weird thing is that you can also set it to be key tracked. That means going audio rate. Now we have proper FM because we are affecting the frequency spectrum, and we can create weird shapes that will give us very crazy sounds. Now you can still go slow with it and apply it to a modulator oscillator, because when you change an oscillator in Hertz, you are actually going to get a different kind of FM. More noisy, but sometimes more interesting. So those are the basic modulators, but we still have other type of modulator to talk about, which are the ones that I call static modulators or manual modulators. I'm talking about the macros, the mod wheel, and the pitch wheel. The pitch wheel is also known as bend, and it will change the tuning or semitones of your sound, depending if you go up or down, and it will always reset to 0. The thing is that you can also use it as a modulator on itself. Typically, on many synthesizers, especially classic ones, the mod wheel is hardwired to the amount of vibrato. The values go from 0 to the maximum value. The same for the macros. Technically, the mod wheel can also be considered a macro, just that it works with some sort of slider rather than a knob. The macros are knobs that go from 0 to the maximum value, and you can set them to control many different parameters. These are great for mainly two reasons. One is for performing. Maybe you set some parameters to the macros to get them handy on the same place without having to go deep into the different oscillators or the different parameters that are inside of the oscillators, like the distortion and the filters and so on. And the other useful thing is when you create presets, because you can use the modulator to create more variation of those presets. Many synthesizers will have macros with names like brightness, color, effects, and so on. And that's because they are actually modulating things that will affect those characters. Maybe they will open the filter, they will add distortion, they will also add more effects, more FM, whatever you want. Now, the last thing that's important to talk about in modulation is the mod matrix. As I said, you program modulation by dragging and dropping. Everything that you do like that then will be shown on the mod matrix. Now, in the same mod matrix, you can actually select a modulation source and a modulation destination. Then you can go positive or negative with the amount, and you can actually skew the shape of that modulation. Think about this as a wave shaper. Of course, with a simple shape as a triangle is easier to visualize and also to hear, but it's going to be applied also to more crazy kind of shapes. Finally, you can change the polarity and maybe the order of the modulation so you keep things tidy. So that's everything you need to know about the modulators. Next episode, we are going to talk about the effects. See you next time.